In this video, I will show you some basic and advanced things you can do with the node controller mod in Cities Skylines. I decided to split this video into two parts. This one is only going to deal with roads. In the next one, we will do all the other networks like railways, paths, walls, quays, and so on. I will be using the original node controller mod. I will explain why at the end of the video, so we don't waste any more time. Let's jump into it. Okay, and we are going to start with the real basics, and that is going to be the most obvious use for the node controller, and that is just increasing the corner offset. That is this slider right in the basic screen, which is going to increase the size of the intersection. And this is going to serve a couple of purposes. So first of all, cars are going to go faster through the intersection, especially these right turns, because by default they had to navigate around this very sharp corner, but now the corner has much bigger radius, which means that they can go faster. So these right turns especially, those are going to have much more capacity. You might also be doing this for just aesthetic purposes. This might look better in your cities, in your settings, with your roads. And last but not least, you can obviously use the associated mod with the node controller, which has the button here with the node controller, and that is to remove the junction markings to then put in your own markings with the intersection marking tool. All right. Now also it might be more realistic because especially the long vehicles, the long trucks are just going to look bad navigating around some really sharp corners. So this is just going to increase realism as well. Now moving on, we also have these kinds of intersections for trams, and this is absolutely not realistic because the corner radii here are just too small. So we would have to increase it to maybe something like this and have it much more realistic. Unfortunately, we now have the wires going straight from the origin points of the intersection, so we would have to get rid of them using the network skins mod and detail in our own. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. I'm going to make a video about that at some point in the future. Moving on, we have highways, we have highway ramps. So this is just vanilla roads. We are obviously going to increase the offset in here and make much smoother entrances and exits from highways, all right? Similar thing we can do as with that intersection on roundabouts. We can just increase the corner offset on entrances and exits from roundabouts, which is going to especially increase the speed at which cars leave the roundabout, which is the most important thing. You obviously want to increase the capacity by just allowing the vehicles to clear the intersection as fast as possible. Now, my opinion is, and my advice in here is that if you are doing this corner offset between two roads that are not the same size, so for example in here I have the small and medium road, then it's just much better looking if you have slightly smaller corner offset on that larger road. Okay, it's just going to look much better. Now, another thing, the node offset is also very good, or the corner offset is also very good to fix these kinds of glitches, because obviously in Cities Skylines, if you are using Move It or any kind of mods that allow you to do these kinds of sharp corners, then, vanilla game doesn't really handle this very well, so you're just going to use on just this segment the corner offset, increase it a bit and fix it. Now, not only you can use the node controller to increase the corner offset, but also to decrease it on some networks that you download from the workshop. So this is, for example, the light rail tracks made by Akruas in the workshop, and they by default have, I think, 15 corner offset. Yeah, 15. And in certain situations, it's not exactly all that ideal. So for example, when it's crossing different roads, different networks, because why would you have this kind of asphalt just bleeding into the road, right? It's much better to just decrease the corner offset and maybe actually even go below this 0. You can easily do that by just going with the backward like that all the way. The game is kind of going to let you. Now also, if you are going to do some kind of stops, let me actually quickly place a tram depot so I'm able to put stops. You would do something like this. It's going to automatically create these platforms, and maybe you would like to have these platforms go all the way to these kinds of intersections. Well, there obviously isn't anything easier than just decreasing that corner offset on both sides. Next essential function is the ability to manipulate the slopes of the intersections themselves. So you have these nice buttons in here, and for example these kinds of intersections where this would be some kind of a main road, you can easily just make it sloped and it's going to be straight like this. You have that ability also on the segments themselves. You have these kinds of flattened segment ends, twist segment ends, so you can play around with those kinds of settings and make sure that these roads are exactly how you want them. This is especially useful if the main road has tram tracks. This is obviously absolutely unacceptable, so we're just going to make this sloped and it's just going to be looking much, much better. One more thing with the sloped intersections is that sometimes you might encounter these issues where you have just that one road that you kind of need in that area, but it's just going to create this overlap over the tracks, so the tram tracks inside the intersection. This is, for example, the former Network Extensions 2 small road that you can these days just download from the workshop separately. But yeah, it just creates these kinds of things, and there are many more roads that do this, and you can easily fix that by just fiddling with these vertical positions of the end nodes of the segments. So I'm, for example, going to make this position to 0 minus 0.1, and yeah, that's already going to fix it. So, these kinds of glitches you can easily fix with the node controller. And this is also something super familiar to you when you are creating highway ramps. Then you kind of need to, at some point, do the transition between the surface variant and the elevated. And it's also going to create a flat intersection. So there's nothing easier than just clicking node controller on that node, make it sloped, and there we go. And just so we go over all of the basic functions, then there is obviously the thing that you can create crossings. So if I'm just going to activate node controller, hover over already created segments, I'm going to click, it's going to create a new node, just like, for example, in the network multi-tool. But in this case, it's already going to set up the crosswalks with traffic lights and everything. But if I really wanted to, I can just turn it into nodeless, again, if this is a straight road, or maybe even turn it into a U-turn or completely custom node. But, this is obviously intended mostly for the crossings. Node controller is also super useful when you just need to create those weird looking, weird shaped intersections, because sometimes in your city, for whatever reason, you might encounter certain situations where you just don't have these roads perfectly aligned. This is kind of, a simple example, obviously, but you just might have those kinds of places where, yeah, the intersections just would not work with the vanilla rules. They would kind of look weird. So obviously the node controller can help in this case. You can just make the intersection, this example that I have in here, much bigger with the node controller. You can really make it look like the entire place is just one intersection. In these kinds of weird places, I wouldn't even be afraid of just clicking those segment end nodes and just moving them like this. And I wouldn't even be afraid of touching the direction numbers. So for example, this one I could slightly increase, or even more corner offset over here. These kinds of things to really make these kinds of weird shapes and weird corners work. Or let's, for example, imagine this situation. You have this kind of intersection, one road going away from it is just a one-way road, and you want to make it, let me actually show that to you with the lane connectors. You want to make it so that the lanes go like this. But obviously now you have it so that this green road is offset. Cars cannot go really straight, they have to make that little offset. So what you can actually do is just create the offset on the road itself. Now this is easily done by holding both Control and Alt and moving the outward nodes like this, or the outward numbers in here, and you are going to quickly discover that certain roads need to go to certain numbers in order to offset them to those typical lane sizes. So I'm going to also do that on this other end, and obviously you would kind of need to then apply the same on some kind of intersection where this road is going to lead. And in this place I'm obviously going to have to increase the corner offset in here, and that's exactly how that needs to be. Now the lane connectors are going to go perfectly straight. This is an idea that's going to be especially useful on some much bigger roads, on like super custom intersections with some one-way roads and stuff like that. But you kind of get the idea, so you're going to be able to apply that in your situations. Sometimes in your cities, you might have these situations where you want to split a bigger road into two roads with just one way. Now, this is usually done on highways, but it can be also done, in urban environments or something. Doesn't really matter where. The point is that it's just not all that easy to make it work. As you can see, you kind of want to align the lanes so that they, match and everything. You might be using the rulers or something. Oh, look at that. I almost got it right, but there are, some kind of glitches in, and it's not exactly all that following the curves. The curve is just kind of distorted on the intersections. So obviously this is a job for the node controller, and here here I would be just doing some kind of changes first with the corner offset, but if I was seeing that it's not really doing what I want, then I would just go into this advanced tab with all these backwards and outwards windows, and I would be just fiddling with these numbers over here. Obviously, if you hover over these windows, it's going to make that node larger, the one that you are currently doing. So I obviously want to do only the outwards, or the outside ones, so I would do something like that. And then I could probably even play with, for example, the directions slightly and really make it highly customized and much better. This is a really interesting idea that you can try in some kind of residential low density or even high density residential neighborhoods where these kinds of roads would be only used for like really slow traffic, just moving between the houses or something. Now, this particular road is, I think, the Dutch brick road from the workshop, which is absolutely perfect for this purpose. And this is actually something I have seen in real life. It would probably kind of irritate me as a driver, but if you are going for realism, then you might try this. So what I'm trying to do is basically create kind of like a zigzag road, which in real life would be used to just slow down traffic, so it wouldn't be completely straight, right? Now, what I would do in this particular case, I would click the segments. By the way, this is a straight road. It's just built straight, nothing special. I would click this node. I would make it custom. I would put the corner offset to something like 5, let's say. I would do that even on this other side, custom 5. And then I would offset the segment in between. So look at that. I'm going to now go into the outwards. I'm going to hold Control Alt, so it's going to be moved simultaneously in one direction. And I'm just going to make it offset by like 5, doesn't matter. And I'm going to do that on the other side. Obviously now I have to go into positives and do it like this. So as you can see, this might actually look kind of interesting in some kind of residential neighborhoods. And obviously this entire node is also providing a nice crosswalk. So, these kinds of parking lanes are nicely divided. So overall, it might be interesting. Now, what if I wanted to fit this parking lot road between these two roads that are not going parallel? I have all of this empty space that is kind of awkward, and I need to fill that either with sidewalks or something, right? Well, I can obviously just use the node controller and actually fit the parking lot road to the shape that is defined by these two roads. So I can just put it like this, how I want it to, and then just use the stretching function on the slider here and make it fit exactly between the two roads. Now, not only I'm going to use the slider, I'm also going to take a look at the outward direction. As you can see, I'm going to hold Control so that it's going to be applied on both roads or both ends simultaneously. And then I'm actually going to apply it even on the other side. And look at that, this is already a good fit. I would then populate it with the actual parking lot stands. Obviously, towards that smaller end, I would kind of need to do fewer rows or something like that. It would not exactly be all that symmetrical and everything, but you can easily figure that out. Also, with the node controller, you can really easily create cul-de-sacs. There are many different ways to creating them. There are even specialized roads for them. You can even do them with medium roads in the vanilla game, but there is also a way with the node controller. Let me just show you. You can quickly just create like a very short segment on the end of the dead end road and then just play, especially with the outward numbers in here, but also with the directions, not only for the outward position, but also and especially for increasing the backwards direction. I'm just going to make them however you want to. Now, for example, if you are doing some kind of compact interchanges with narrow roads like these ones, these Shuto expressways, you might go for extra realism by simply increasing the width of these roads inside the curves. That's obviously only done with the node controller, and this can be super easily done by simply clicking the nodes at the starts of these curves and just stretching them, because this is also going to stretch the inside segment. I'm going to overdo it a lot. This is probably not necessary, but just so you can see the actual difference, right? So I'm going to go for 150%, for example. And there's nothing easier than just moving the second nodes and controlling this way the size, the length at which the transition happens between the standard width and the increased width inside the curve, all right? Now, this next idea is something that doesn't really work all that well, but I'm going to show you anyway because you might find some uses for it. Now, what I'm talking about is the sudden change of lanes that cars are doing in city skylines. So when they want to switch lanes on highways, they're just going to do it very, very suddenly, which is not exactly looking all that realistic, even though you might argue that if it's like a reckless driver, it's perfectly realistic. But still, if all cars are doing that, it's just looking weird, right? This motorcycle just did that. Yeah, this car. So what we would want is, because, well, first of all, let me tell you that cars are switching lanes only at nodes. You can easily see that with the traffic manager, for example. So it might give you an idea that simply increasing the size of the node with the node controller is going to fix this. And you are right, it's actually going to fix it. But on highways, you only have the option of going with the custom intersection type or custom node type, which is basically how intersections look. I'm just going to increase the corner offset over here, and you can easily see, by the way, that cars are already switching super smoothly on the entire length of this node, which is nice, but unfortunately it's going to give you that intersection texture on this particular vanilla highway. Now, I'm showing you this because you might be doing this on some kind of highways or roads where you have super similar textures between the normal segment and node, so there it would be useful. And you can also paint over this with the intersection marking tools. I'm not obviously saying that you should use this everywhere on your highway system, on your entire map, but maybe in front of some intersections or, you know, in some kind of places where you have problems with the merging and lane switching, you might be able to use this. It's obviously, again, up to you to adapt this idea to your cities or not, you know, maybe it's not useful at all. Also for highways, if you want to go for more realism, then you can obviously just click the nodes and you can use the embankment function and make the roads in the curves tilted, obviously, into the circle, into the turn, so that cars are going to have easier time doing the turn at some reasonable speed, which is obviously not really going to affect the functionality or the flow on the road, but it's just going to look better. Obviously, this would look much better on some kind of elevated roads or in some kind of highway interchanges, for example, ramps and stuff like that. Another thing with highways, this, for example, is the pack of highways, which is called, I think, highway over wall, and it is exactly that. The elevated segment has this concrete block underneath it, and the bridge segment actually has the opening. And if you have it built like this over some kind of a surface highway or just lower network, doesn't really matter, then it's not perpendicular, and you might want to align these kinds of ends of the retaining walls or, you know, these supports to the sides of the roads. You might have some kind of a parallel retaining wall going on there, or maybe some kind of a key, and you would really like to align it to it. So there's nothing easier than obviously using the node controller and doing the offsets. Now, what I would do in here is I would make one corner go exactly to where I wanted to have it. So for example, right there, I would do exactly the same thing, obviously kind of mirrored on the other side, and then I would just take the node controller. Now, this is something that might be actually easier in the new node controller. I'm not really sure, but in this case, you kind of have to do it twice. Obviously, you're now going to do it for the one segment first, for example, 14 in this case. I would kind of fiddle with a bit more if I wasn't doing it this fast as an example, and then you kind of need to replicate it for that other, the neighboring segment end, right? And you're going to end up with having a nice and smooth wall. Now, obviously, this is also kind of realistic. It's not like this is the only way to do it, but you can definitely see that it just looks much cleaner. When you are building tunnel entrances, then by default, even if you are not using the node controller, then the node in front of the tunnel portal is going to be the custom type. And this is actually not ideal because you can see that even on the vanilla road, there is this kind of weird thing with the texture, and the tunnel portal can actually look even better. And that's easily done by simply switching the custom into nodeless. Look at that! The texture is immediately much cleaner. The tunnel portal, the wall here is kind of smoother as well. So this is just much, much better. Now, this example is the highway over wall, that kind of pack of roads. And you can see that the guardrail has some sort of a weird texture inconsistent on the node. Again, just going to make it nodeless. And even the portal is just going to be so much better. But I think that the Shuto expressways are going to benefit from the most because, as you can see, they don't have the detailed nodes, they don't have the markings on them, and even the texture is different. So look at this, custom, nodeless. And look at that, almost seamless. The wall is much smoother and overall is just looking much, much better. So I highly recommend you do this on your tunnel entrances. One thing you can do if you want to create some kind of an arched bridge and you want to actually have the road going into some kind of arch geometry, then you can use the node controller on just a single bridge segment like I have in here. You're going to go into that mode for the end of the segment on one side. You're going to go into the vertical direction and put it to some kind of a small positive number. So for example, 0.2, you're going to do that on both sides. And then you need to play somewhat with the backwards direction on both ends. So that means holding control. I'm going to put it to like 0.9, for example, so that it nicely clears up. And look at that. I created this cute little bump over the road that cars are actually following. And this might be some kind of like a stone arch bridge or just some kind of a, I don't know, medieval countryside bridge or something like that. But you can see that it's just super easy to do that. And it's obviously super symmetrical as well. Also, the node controller can be used to fix certain bugs in the game. It kind of happened to me a couple of times. It was really annoying before the node controller because it was unfixable back then. But right now, if you load into your safe and for some reason somewhere in your city you have this kind of a bump on your road, then you can just click it with the node controller and it's usually going to have the slope number non-zero for some reason. I don't know why. But you can just put it back to 0 and, be done with it. So maybe this is like a specific bug that only happens to me because of some mod combinations, but if you encountered that in your cities and it's super annoying, I know, then you can just fix it like that. With the node controller, you can also create something like this. This is just a gravel road. It's completely straight, as you can see with Move It, but it has been manipulated so it looks this rough and kind of chaotic. This might be used for some kind of beaches or, I don't know, some kind of rural roads in the countryside. You can just switch it into some different roads from the workshop, like all these kinds of dirt roads or mud roads. It's obviously going to, if you're going to switch the types, going to remember the node controller settings. Oh yeah, especially with the mud road, I can already see some kind of like bike track, motorcycle tracks or some kind of things like that. This is kind of difficult to set up, especially on longer distances. As you can see, the segments are not that long. You kind of need to have this mod that sets the maximum segments size. I'm not really sure how this mod is called. I'm probably going to type it on the screen, but you're going to set it to some kind of a low number. Then you're going to build the road. You're going to take the node controller. It's important that all of these nodes are going to be set to custom, and then you're just going to go segment end by segment end, and you're just going to manipulate these edges of the segments. You're going to maybe want to try these direction numbers changed, and you're just going to make it like this. Okay, so that's all the useful things that I could think of right now, at least for roads. Big thanks especially to Hitsu, who posted some of these wonderful ideas on Discord. If you guys have any other ideas for roads, definitely post them in the comments so others can see. Now, the reason I use the original node controller is that it offers, right now at least, more advanced customization of the segment's ends. So even though the renewable version has more accessible and convenient tools, specifically made for roads, they both still have their place in the game, and they do slightly different stuff. But you can only have one or the other. You cannot run both at once. And especially things I will show you in the next part can only be done with the original one. So for me, it's clear which one I need to have. Anyway, stay tuned for that second part. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Hopefully it gave you some useful ideas. If it did, then you can do all the things that will help the video and the channel, like clicking the thumbs up, leaving a comment, subscribing if you're new here. And you can also become a channel member. Huge thanks to all the current supporters. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Take care and goodbye.